Hi, I'm Lorenn Walker. Welcome to my home office here in Waialua on Oahu in the state of Hawaii. I'm going to talk today, January 6, 2013, about a new book that we published a couple months ago, Restorative Justice Today, Practical Applications. It's co-edited by myself and Catherine von Wormer. The book is a global perspective of restorative justice internationally across the world in a variety of areas and levels. So we have prevention. We have a section in the book on prevention, using restorative justice for prevention, using it when there's an arrest or diverting someone who's been arrested, then using restorative justice for people who go to prison and for people who come out of prison for parole and probation. Also using restorative justice for nation building after wars, for community reparation. We've had a number of really renowned restorative justice experts, scholars, practitioners contribute to this book. First of all, it was great to work with Catherine. Catherine is a scholar, and she's the author of 16 books. She's a professor of social work, and really, it was so educational for me to work with Catherine to put this book together because she's so skilled and knows so much. And we were so happy to go with Sage because they kept the book affordable. It's really important to Sage to have books that are affordable for students and people. So first of all, the foreword is by Shad Maruna at Queen's University in Belfast, Ireland. Shad is an expert in desistance theory, which is about how people stop doing bad behavior, how they stop doing drugs, stop doing crime, and desist from it. How do they lead law-abiding lives? Shad's studied desistance theory. He's an expert in it, and he wrote a really interesting foreword. Other people that we were fortunate to have contribute to the book and to learn from include Howard Zehr, who is sometimes called the godfather or the grandfather of restorative justice. And Howard, it was really interesting to hear Howard's stories about how he originally got in, kind of stumbled into restorative justice when he worked for a halfway house and was working with the guys in a halfway house who were coming out of prison, I think, and had some problems, and there was a fire, and he ended up doing a restorative intervention. Also, two other pioneers that we were able to talk to. One of them who did contribute was Bert Galloway and Joe Hudson I talked to, and Bert wrote about his experience with Joe doing the original restorative dialogue back in, it predates the Canadian application of restorative justice, where people found ways to try and repair the harm and make restitution. And it was also very interesting to work with David Wexler, who contributed a chapter on therapeutic jurisprudence. And that therapeutic jurisprudence is used in courts across the United States and the world, where you use a therapeutic, more rehabilitative approach to problems that come before the courts. The drug courts are an example of a therapeutic intervention in a court. And David wrote a very interesting chapter. And the courts in Australia, Michael King, a judge in Australia, he uses solution focus. He wrote a bench book. It's a guidebook for judges. And they use solution focus brief therapy approaches, which I use, that I learned from my teacher, the late Insoo Kim Berg, who's a co-founder of Solution Focused Brief Therapy. And I learned about her from another author who contributed to the book, Gail Burford, who is a very special mentor and someone I deeply admire. And Gail introduced me to Insoo's work, and I'm so grateful still to this day for that. And Gail did really important work in intimate violence and domestic violence using circle processes. He was one of the original people who did that. He and Joan Purnell did it. They did important research in Newfoundland, Canada. And also, we've got Mark Thornsberg from Australia, who works with children and students She contributed. Also Dennis Wong, who has a very interesting chapter about his work in China doing restorative justice with juveniles. And Dennis talks about, I've never met Dennis, but he sounds really interesting, and he himself was a kind of rascally delinquent, and he sees the value of restorative justice from his own perspective, and he's a professor there. Ida Heidel in Norway wrote an interesting chapter, and Ted Wachtel, who is a very, very important person in promoting restorative justice in the United States. Ted was one early promoter of restorative justice, and he's got the International Institute for Restorative Practices today. Gabrielle Maxwell from New Zealand wrote a chapter. Gabrielle's done really important research. And then also we have a great chapter here, Clergy Child Sexual Abuse, the Restorative Justice Option by Theo Grivaldis. Sorry about your name, I wrecked there, Theo. But Theo's got a great chapter in here, and Theo runs a restorative justice think tank, like in London, and does a lot of important research in restorative justice. Also, we have a chapter by Anne Hayden in New Zealand. Oh, and that reminds me too, we have Kay Pranis, Kay Pranis wrote a very nice chapter, and Kay actually stayed in this room. She spent a weekend here, and so did Anne Hayden from New Zealand another time. Another time Anne was here, and Kay Pranis talks about how her work at in the corrections, how that was linked up with Bert Galloway's work. So it's really great. Also, I really love this chapter by Carl Stauffer, the Restorative Interventions for Post-War Nations. And Carl works with Howard Zehr. He wrote interesting about 3 African nations using restorative justice for nation building after wars. And then one of my favorite chapters in here is titled Speaking Earth, Environmental Restoration and Restorative Justice by Fred Beesthorn. And it's fascinating about how we can use restorative justice for our planet, healing our planet, and the environmental issues that we're facing today. So anyway, that's pretty much the book. If you have any questions or comments you want to give us about it, we'd love to hear from you. My email address is Lorenn, Lorenn, at Hawaii, HAWAII.edu. Anything we can help you with, we'd be interested in hearing your perspectives on the book. Have a great educational experience with this book, and yeah, let us know what you develop and that you're going to write about, that we can read and learn from too in the future. So thank you very much. Aloha.